Welcome to the Project Management Prepcast, helping you prepare for the PMP exam. Here's your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner.
Hello and welcome to the Project Management Prepcast, where we show you how to study for the PMP exam from many angles. I'm your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner. In this interview, I would like to introduce you to Dan Ryan and the 7 questions that every PMP exam coaching student asks. Dan is not only a certified PMP, he is also a PMP exam coach. And as a PMP exam coach, he works with students like yourself to achieve the goal of passing the PMP exam. And he has done that hundreds of times. He successfully helped, motivated and guided his students to become PMP certified. And he can do that for you as well, because we decided that now is the right time for us to start offering personalized PMP exam coaching to you. To learn more about what type of coaching we offer, please go to pmprepcast.com/coaching. That will give you all the details and introduce you to our coaches. Again, that's pmprepcast.com/coaching. And please do yourself a favor and listen to this interview, even if you think that you don't need a personal coach for the PMP exam, because the 7 questions that Dan discusses are important. Everyone worries about them, and Dan has the answers for you. Here we go. Hello, Dan. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Cornelius. It's great to be here.
So we want to talk about the 7 questions that every PMP exam coaching student asks you. But before we go there, how do you define the term coaching, and also in regards to the PMP exam?
Well, that's a great question. I believe that coaching is using an individual who is an expert in a certain area or domain in order to gain the skills that you require to become an expert yourself, or to become very skilled in that area as well. As it relates to the PMP exam, I would say that a coach would be an expert in all of the facets of the PM framework, as well as the structure of the PMP exam and the strategies and tips and tricks and tools and techniques to passing the PMP exam.
Oftentimes I hear from students that they're using somebody at their office as their coach, a colleague who has just passed the PMP exam. Would you consider that to be coaching as well, if a colleague at work who has just passed the PMP exam helps you through your own exam?
Well, look, the PMP exam is a very difficult exam, and if there are good-natured people out there who have passed the PMP exam and they're willing to collaborate with their colleagues, that's very nice. However, coaching on an expert level is, understanding the PMP exam on a very finite detail, knowing, every structure of the exam, the types of questions that are faced, how to manage time. And, it's very much a granular exercise that requires a great deal of expertise. So if that's all you can get, then go ahead and utilize someone from your office. But it would probably be much better for you to engage a professional coach who does this for more than a hobby.
And why do many PMP students choose a coach in order to prepare for their exam?
I think the main reason for that is that many people find themselves these days in the need for one-on-one attention, as opposed to being relegated maybe to a group environment. Many of these PMP prep boot camps that are out there today leave people feeling kind of isolated and lost in the crowd, if you will. Whereas, a coach, an expert PMP coach, is going to assess your needs, understand what your strengths and weaknesses are, and is going to bring you to the finish line, focusing on you and only you. So people really like that one-on-one attention. They really like that expertise, and it makes them feel a lot more comfortable throughout this very difficult learning process.
How many students have you personally coached towards the PMP exam so far?
Well, at least 250 to 300 students.
Wow. Okay. That is an enormous number. And you work with them personally, right?
Absolutely. I work with every single one of my students, and we do so, either online over such tools as WebEx or Skype or virtual tools, whatever is, working for the student, online collaboration tools and on the schedule of the student.
All right, we're going to get into those 7 questions in just a moment. But before we get there, how many of your students would you say have asked these 7 questions?
Well, a good percentage of them, definitely the large majority. These are questions that, continually come up, especially, not just with students, but when people call me or email me to check out my services, to see if they want to be engaged. These are many of the questions that I get via email or, even on the phone, as they're trying to figure out if coaching is right for them. These are the questions that often come up.
Okay, and now we're going to get into these 7 questions, and the way we're going to do this is you've given me the 7 questions. I have them here in front of me. I'm going to be pretending to be a PMP exam student, and then you can give us your answers and your thought to all of these 7 questions. So, Dan, question number 1 here. Why did I fail the PMP exam so miserably when I studied for so long and so hard?
Well, you probably failed the PMP exam because you probably went online, went to Google, typed in something like, how should I study for the exam? And you probably saw some comments from people up there that said things like, you have to read the PMBOK 2 to 3 times cover to cover, or you have to memorize these little bits, or you have to do these particular practice questions. And then you gathered all of these tidbits together and thought that you had it all figured out. And then when you got into the PMP exam and you saw the nature of the exam and just how in-depth and difficult some of these scenario-based questions were, as well as the length and the time management needs, you became totally overwhelmed and were unable to pass the exam because you did not approach the exam with the proper preparation and mechanics for taking the exam.
Question number 2. I am terrible at mathematics and at formulas. How will I ever be able to do all these earned value questions?
It's not rocket science. A lot of time people think that this math is a lot more difficult than it is. The truth is, if you've, had somewhat of even like a high school level of algebra or some exposure to at that point, you have the skills that you need to do the math questions. This is just a matter of approaching these math questions in a kind of a formulaic kind of a way. So the first thing you do is you memorize the formulas that are most likely to show up on the PMP exam, and we have a real good idea of which ones those are, okay? And then once you have a theoretical kind of understanding of these formulas and whether or not they are talking about plans or talking about actuals or variances or forecasts, and you understand the theory behind it, you then go through and do a number of practice exercises. And, this is rote learning. After a certain number of repetitions of going through these math exercises and understanding these formulas, you have your aha moment, and the math is no longer a problem for you. It's actually quite straightforward.
Question 3 has 2 versions, and I'm going to give you both at the same time here. So version 1 for question 3 is, I took a few practice tests and I did okay with them. So why did I fail the PMP exam? And version 2, I took a few practice tests and I did okay with them. Am I ready to take the PMP exam?
So for version 1, I would say the reason you failed, even though you did a few practice tests, was because you probably were not using a very good set of practice questions. One of the things that I've done over time is vetted out some of the best and most realistic PMP style practice questions that are available. And, through qualifying them and making sure that only the best questions went to my students, we were able to ascertain their true level of readiness, because as they improved on their test scores, we knew that they would be ready for the exam. Okay, and the second question, the answer is maybe, okay, but probably not, all right? There is a certain threshold of scoring that you want to achieve in order to be, quote unquote, ready for the exam. It's well known out there and discussed often. You really need to be doing 200 question multiple choice PMP exams and scoring well into the 80s, all right? So if you've done a couple of practice exams and maybe you got a 68 or a 73, or, you had a couple of scores that you felt were pretty good, that doesn't mean that you're going to score that on the day that you go into the testing center. Don't forget, there's going to be nerves, okay? There's going to be the environment might not be comfortable to you because it's not your home or where you did your studying, all right? There's a number of factors that could cause your score on the real test day to drop below what it was during your practice exam. So if you're only scoring kind of mediocre scores on your practice exams and then you have another drop on the day of the real test, that cannot be a good result sometimes. So that's how that goes.
Question number 4. This one comes straight out of my personal experience. Dan, if you had been my coach, I would have asked you this question myself. Can you help me with risk and quality, please?
I can help you with risk and quality, Cornelius. Risk and quality tend to be real backbreakers for a lot of people on the exam. You know, there's certain ways of approaching it. The quality tends to be seen a lot on the PMP exam. You know, you need to review all those little things like the quality tools and the difference between quality assurance and quality control. You have to go through all of those risk processes and make sure you understand the whole sequence from planning risk all the way down through creating the risk responses. What's the difference between qualitative and quantitative risk analysis? All right, so start there and then drill down deeper. Make sure that you understand all the concepts of risk and quality because they are going to be a good percentage of the questions that you see on the exam.
Question 5, similar to question 3, we have 2 questions in this one here. They're related. What do I have to score in order to pass the exam? And can I get below proficient in more than one category and still pass?
Well, I don't believe the actual score to pass the exam is known. There is a myth out there around, I think, 61 or 62% to pass the exam, which would be approximately 105 out of the 175 graded questions. But now we have come to understand that there are different levels of difficulty to the exam questions. And based upon if they are easier or in a middle range of difficulty or very difficult, you can get different values. So we don't know the exact score that you need to pass, but if you have an excellent kind of PM question simulator, when you get your results, it will provide you with a reading on your proficiency by knowledge area and by process group. And you're going to want to make sure that as many of those are at moderately proficient or proficient. But to answer the question, can you get below proficient in more than one category and pass? Yes, you can. You do not have to have proficiency in all of the areas in order to pass the exam. But again, the exact ratings and formulas are not known.
Okay, and here is my favorite one because I get asked this one a lot as well from my students. How long should it take me to study effectively and pass the exam?
So this is a tricky question because, you know, a lot of people come at this, maybe they already failed the exam. So they've, you know, done some studying, they have some resources, and so their next study track will be a little bit different than maybe someone who's never taken the exam. But, you know, with those factors in mind, I would say what I've seen from people who are dedicated and are willing to put in the time to actually get this exam passed, you know, they will spend upwards of 1 to 2 hours per day studying the exam. I've represented programs with my students that have been 30 days long, that have been 45 days long, that have been 60 days long. Okay, so everybody has different things going on in their lives, you know, work schedules, families, etc., and that will influence the length of your study schedule. But it's better to try to, in my opinion, it's better to try to approach this extremely aggressively and to really do your studying in large blocks and daily in order to get this exam done sooner or later. Those folks who put together long study plans of 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 months, I see a diminishing returns on their ability to pass the exam. So long story short, I'm going to put it in the category of 30 days for the folks who are extremely aggressive and can dedicate a lot of time, all the way up to maybe 60 days or a little bit beyond for those who might need to stretch it out a little more.
And then question 7, the final question here that everybody asks. Do I really have to read the PMBOK guide twice, like everyone says?
No, you do not. As a matter of fact, and I hope I don't offend anybody out there who disagrees with me, but I don't believe you have to even read it once. Okay? you should have a PMBOK. Every good project manager should have the PMBOK in the latest edition, and it's an extremely valuable reference. And it will be used as a resource in your approach to passing the PMP exam. However, think of it as a reference guide that can be called upon when knowledge is needed on very specific or confusing matters, okay? So the really good way to approach it is kind of like having it on the shelf, having it there, and as you're maybe going through your studies with a dedicated PMP prep book, okay, or a dedicated series of learning videos, you can then have the PMBOK on hand as a reference to clarify further on concepts that you might not understand fully.
Okay, so those were the 7 questions that every PMP exam student asks you as a coach. Why do you think that the students focus so much on these 7 questions?
I think that it's still very much a mystery to many people about the format and structure of the PMP exam, the application, how to fill it out, how to get accepted, how to be eligible, the contact hours required for the exam, how to manage your time. It's very much kind of like a real, unknown to many people. And this creates a sense of frustration as they approach their preparation for the exam. They don't know, which areas to study. They don't know how to break it down. They don't know how to approach it on a time scale, okay? So, they go at it haphazardly. Sometimes they have bad results. And, they're looking for clarification. They're looking for, information on how to approach this the right way. And that's kind of what the genesis of all these questions comes from.
Are there any questions out there that they should be asking you, but they're not asking you?
It's funny, sometimes, occasionally, I have candidates and students come to me that do ask these questions early. And, these people are sharp, and these are the ones where I get that feeling right away like, oh, okay, this person is dialed in and kind of understands, what's going on here. So, yeah, there are questions. One of the most common questions that is almost never asked, but, they hear about it, but they never really, verbalize on it is about the PM matrix located on page 61 of the PMBOK. Of course, that is a very important visual representation of the project management body of knowledge and the project management framework, all right? And that is very much a guiding tool for approaching the PMP exam and of course, one of the most important brain dumps that you could have in the testing center to help you. So
yeah, and let me just interrupt you here because let's make sure that this works in the future as well, because this is page 61 in the PMBOK Guide 5th edition. This changes in every single PMBOK guide. So if you're listening to this far in the future, PMBOK Guide 6, PMBOK Guide 7 or 8, this thing is usually it's table 3-1 project management process group and knowledge area mapping. So no matter if you're listening to this with PMBOK 5 or PMBOK 15, that's an important page.
Good point. So that's a big one right there, okay? The second one would be what formulas do I need to know for the PMP exam? As you know, there are many formulas, upwards of 20 or 30 formulas that can be referenced maybe on the exam. However, it's likely that you would probably only see somewhere in the range of maybe 15 formulas on the exam, most likely. So, which formulas do I need to know for the exam? Do I have to memorize every single formula out there? Or is there another strategy where we could maybe look at a certain section of formulas and say, we're extremely likely to see these formulas on the exam, so let's start by memorizing these first. Another concept, another question that I would love to hear more is, what are these ITTOs, these inputs, outputs, tools, and techniques, and what is their structure, and how can I learn about them, and how do they manifest themselves on the PMP exam? The ITTOs tend to scare a lot of folks. A lot of folks don't even know about them. So I would say that if someone came to me and asked me early on, tell me about these ITTOs, tell me about how they work on the PMP exam, that would be a very astute question. Another question would be, what are some tricks to answering these long scenario-based questions on the PMP exam? Okay, so this is a great difficulty for many students. They have these long paragraphs of questions, and in these questions, they put things to distract you. They put, things in weird orders. What you want to do on these is you want to employ certain tips and tricks, like maybe reading the last part of the question first, or maybe doing a process of elimination on certain answers. based upon referencing your PM matrix or your formula sheet. There's different ways to approach it. But something that would be good for students to come and ask for about early is, how can I approach some of these long, tricky, wordy questions? And then that kind of leads into the next one, which is how can I manage my time on the exam? Because more and more these days, from what I'm hearing, the test is taking longer and longer. There's more and more earned value on it. It's taking the full 4 hours, and students are getting to the end, and they're realizing that as they approach the end of the exam, they don't have enough time to finish, or they're going to be rushed. So, maybe they marked too many questions for review, and now they're having trouble navigating back and forth to figure out what they answered, what they didn't answer. Okay, so management of the time on the exam is very important, and this should be something that a student would ask about early, so that you would be able to, once you get on top of that time management piece, then you also have a much better chance of passing. And finally, the last point that I would love to hear would be, what's the best approach for learning all the content, and how many practice exams should I take, and what scores should I score? So, referring back to the best practices for my coaching, I would say the best approach that you could possibly take would be to find yourself a world-class set of video learning lessons, which will provide you all of the content on all of the processes, the framework, and the body of knowledge in a visual but strong learning type of modality. Okay? And then while doing that, make sure that you have access to practice exams that provide you with questions that are, almost known to be almost exactly like the ones on the real test. Of course, they can't be like the real ones, but, try to find a source of questions that are highly regarded to be very realistic. And then underscoring both of those pieces, get yourself a PMP exam coach who can kind of dovetail it all together for you, make sure that you're studying the right way, learning on the right timeline, taking the test questions right, and getting ready for the exam. And then finally, when you get to a point where you are repeatedly doing simulated exams at scores of 80% or better, you're ready to go in and pass that exam.
So in conclusion, other than the answers to the questions that we've already heard, what are your personal top 3 recommendations for those who are currently preparing for the PMP exam?
Well, what I recommend to my students, I have a very precise and structured approach to the exam, but the resources are very important. And what I recommend is, number one, like I said, make sure that you watch a world-class video learning set or series, okay? And so I recommend the PM Prepcast video series, all right?
Thank you.
You're very welcome, because that is the absolutely most comprehensive set of videos out there to cover absolutely everything you would see on the PMP exam. And when you combine it with being able to watch it from your computer or your iPhone or your tablet or your smartphone, you have a study situation which is good for people on the go. And we know project managers are always on the go. So that's part one. Part two is make sure that you have a really good world-class PMP prep book. And I recommend Andy Crow's book, How to Pass the PMP on Your First Try. Okay? So you want to get through the foundational stuff, such as, the introductory chapters to the book, the stuff that's on the introduction to, the knowledge areas and the process groups, the foundational information, organizational types, all that good stuff. You want to be watching the videos on all the introductory items, and then your exam coach comes in as you start to get into the knowledge areas, and you then work with your exam coach to progress through the videos and the book while also being coached and lectured by your exam coach who brings you through all of those materials. Then you open up the PM exam simulator and you go in, and there are 9 full-length practice exams, each 200 questions long. Okay, so you have 1,800 unique exam questions. And what you do is you progress through these 9 exams, and by the end of getting done with all those 9 exams, you want to be scoring, like I said, in the 80s or better on those practice exams. So watch your videos, do your video lessons, read your PMP exam prep book, but don't focus on the PMBOK too much, and then get into that PM exam simulator and go through all of those 9 exams and be scoring in the 80s when you're done. And then that's what makes you ready for this exam.
Wonderful. Dan, thank you so much for being on the program today.
Thank you, Cornelius. Glad to be here.
And that's it for our interview with PMP Exam Prep Coach Dan Ryan. As a reminder, to learn more about the type of PMP exam coaching that we offer, please go to pmprepcast.com/coaching. Until next time.